What is up, Maniacs? Welcome back to another Twilight Masquerade TCG guide. This time we're looking at our first Stage 2 Pokemon, and that's Rillaboom. So obviously we're going to be going through Thwackey, Grookey. Are they going to be competitive? Are they going to be collectible? Let's find out. Let's start with Grookey. So we're going to work our way from basic up to Stage 2. And Grookey, for a basic that wants to evolve, is really good. There are two key things you really want with your basics that are looking to evolve, and that is good HP and good retreat cost, and luckily this has both. So it's got 70 HP, which means it avoids getting bench sniped by a Dragapult, and it can be found using Buddy Poffin. Retreat cost of 1 means you can attach an energy and retreat it out of the active if you're still trying to set it up, or you want to pivot in a setup Pokemon. And then in terms of its attacks, ideally you're looking for basic Pokemon that want to evolve to have a 30 hit point attack, which it does have, but you ideally want it to have a single energy, because by the time you've attached the second energy, you're likely to have evolved it, which makes its 30 damaging attack pretty much useless. And you want the 30 because that can occasionally get knockouts on already damaged Pokemon. So you could potentially take a 2 prizes if you already on the previous turn damaged it. Let's now take a look at Thwackey, which is probably the best card out of the 3 Pokemon in this evolution chain. And that's purely because of its ability, Boom Boom Groove. It's relatively niche, so you have to have a Pokemon in the active spot that has the Festival Lead ability. But if you have that, this is really powerful, so you can find any card in your deck and put it into your hand. So it's like Pidgeot EX, except for this can stack, so you could have 3 Thwackey on the bench, and essentially you can get 3 of any card from your deck into your hand, which is super powerful, and is probably exactly why they've put this super niche kind of effect into play, where you have to have a Festival Lead ability Pokemon in the active. In terms of everything else, it's not particularly important for this card because you are really just using it for ability. Its retreat is bad because you can't pivot it without using switches or switch carts. Its attack is doing too little damage for the amount of energy required, and its HP is not great because it can be bench sniped by Greninja EX, which we need to be aware of in the new format. So you will have to be playing Rabscas or Manaphy's on your bench to avoid your Thwackeys being taken out by that deck. Thwackey also has this Twilight Masquerade stamped version of the card that you get in the pre-release sets. I was lucky enough to get one of these because Thwackey was the card in my pre-release set, so that's just one for you collectors to know about. And then finally we have Rillaboom. So I see Rillaboom as more of a support option for Thwackey. So Thwackey itself is obviously a support Pokemon, but if you find yourself in the scenario where you've got a Thwackey in the active, you don't have a Festival Lead Pokemon like Diplin to move into the active to attack, you could evolve that Thwackey into Rillaboom and get an attack off for a decent amount of damage. So it has 2 attacks, which are Drum Beating and Wood Hammer. So Wood Hammer would be the attack that you want to use if you're trying to get a knockout. And in most Diplin and Rillaboom, or Diplin and Thwackey decks, you usually would want to play Maximum Bout. And if you're playing Maximum Bout, it means Rillaboom is doing 230 damage, if you can get it onto the Rillaboom, of course. And that can get you knockouts on lower HP EXs, like Iron Hands. So Rillaboom is more likely to be used as a backup attacker if you need to avoid, if you find a Thwackey in your active spot and you've got a low HP EX that you could potentially take out for a couple of prize cards. So Woodhammer is really good. The downside is it will do 50 damage to itself. So if you already have low HP, you may end up giving up a prize card to maybe gain 2 prize cards. This happened to me in the pre-release tournament, so I was using Rillaboom because that's the deck that I ended up starting with at the pre-release tournament. And I did lose a prize and also gain a prize because of Woodhammer, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword. And I actually drew that game because of that attack. So it's, yeah, you've got to be careful when you use it, but hopefully because your Thwackey have been on the bench, you're not going to have any damage on your Thwackey in the first place. So Rillaboom should be okay to use its Woodhammer attack to try and get the 2 prize. If you're essentially down to, or if your opponent's down to a single prize left to take, and you can't get the knockout, it may be better to try and cause a bit of disruption to buy yourself a bit more time next turn to try and win the game. So you could use Drum Beating to achieve this by forcing your opponent to have to attach another energy And if they don't have another energy attached, then you've successfully disrupted them. They will then have to pass it back over to you, and hopefully you can finish out the game. I mean, that is a last-ditch effort to try and win, but you can disrupt as well if that's necessary. So Rillaboom on the face of it doesn't look too good of a card, but when you put it into certain contexts, it can be really powerful as a backup option for Thwackey if it finds itself in the need to attack. Because Thwackey's attack only does 50 damage, it's not going to be enough. So Rillaboom is actually quite good in those scenarios. Retreat cost of 4 is really bad, obviously. I guess you could attach Heavy Baton to it to save the energy, but the attack, to be honest, the attacks for Rillaboom are not that high. And if you're in the Diplin deck, the attacks are really low. You need 1 energy, so it's probably not even worth playing Heavy Baton in this scenario. And its HP is respectable as well for a stage 1 that only gives out a single prize. Let's now take a look at some of the Pokemon cards that synergise well with Thwackey, and the most prominent one is Diplin. So obviously any Pokemon with Festival Lead ability is going to synergise well with Thwackey, because that is a requirement for Thwackey to be useful with its ability. So Diplin can do vast amount of damage for a single prize stage 1 Pokemon with Do the Wave attack. It only costs 1 energy as well, which is insane. And the attack essentially can do up to 100 damage for each of your bench Pokemon. So there's 5 on the bench. You can do 20 times 5, which is 100. And a lot of decks play maximum belt, so you can do 150. And then if you've got the Festival Grounds Stadium in play, the ability Festival Lead kicks in, which means you can attack twice. So you effectively can do 300 damage with a maximum belt attached to Diplin. So this is a really powerful card. The downside of it is it's got high retreat, so it's difficult to pivot. You're going to want to play a switch at least in your deck, or have ways of being able to switch Pokemon in and out if necessary. 80 HP is really low, so even Radiant Greninja can take out Diplin, so you're going to want some bench protection. But that's the same for Thwackey, which is another reason why the two synergise really well. But yeah, Diplin is going to be the main card that you want to pair with Thwackey. You do have an option of a Goldeen, which also has a Festival Lead, and Goldeen is primarily used to energy disrupt. So it's Whirlpool attack. You flip a coin. If heads, you can discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. So if you're facing a Charizard EX, for example, it has 2 energy on. If you're lucky enough, you could discard both of those energies, which will completely disrupt a Charizard EX deck. So this is potentially a good backup. I wouldn't necessarily form a whole deck around Goldeen, but this is potentially a good support Pokemon that you can add into your Thwackey deck. And then finally, the last Pokemon with Festival Lead is Swirlix. And I think Swirlix is a bit more of a bench sniping kind of attacker. So sneaky placement, again, only 1 energy. You can put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, but with the Festival Lead ability, you can essentially put 4 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So you could bench snipe a damaged Pokemon or a low HP, 30 HP Pokemon. In terms of trainer cards that synergise well, we've got Bug Catching Set, which is really good, especially in a Diplin and Thwackey deck, because they're both grass Pokemon. They both require energy to power up. So using Bug Catching Set, you can find your grass Pokemon and your grass energy. So really powerful synergy here. Festival Grounds is, of course, the key trainer card that you're going to want to use in your Thwackey deck, because you're going to want to be pairing it with those Festival Lead Pokemon, and Festival Lead Pokemon need Festival Grounds, so it all kind of synergizes all together. And this card itself allows you to recover from special conditions and effects of special conditions if you have an energy attached to your active Pokemon. In terms of the ace spec, from a Thwackey point of view, you're going to want to use Hyper Aroma, because you can get up to 3 Thwackey on the bench. That means you can find 3 different cards from your deck. But obviously, if you're playing the Diplin, you may want to consider Maximum Belt, and Diplin is the next video in this series, so you'll see and understand exactly why that is. And then lastly, there are so many trainer cards that you can include with a Thwackey deck, because Thwackey essentially can grab you anything you like. So depending on what deck you put Thwackey into, you're going to want to play different supporters, different trainers, different items, etc. This is just one example which works really well in a Diplin Thwackey deck. So you can choose 1 or more and shuffle a Pokemon from your discard pile back into your deck, a tool card, a stadium card, and an energy card. And obviously the tool and the stadium are the key ones here, because you can essentially grab your maximum belt back. You can grab your festival grounds stadium back. So Rosanna's backup is really powerful in that deck. And again, we'll come to this in the Dipling guide, which is next in the video series. And that just about rounds up our Thwackey video. The last thing to do is to give it a rating. So I have been struggling with Thwackey to rate it because the ability is really powerful. If it didn't require the Festival Lead ability Pokemon to be in the active, this would easily be up in the A tier area. But because it's so niche and the Festival Lead Pokemon are not that great other than Dipling, which has potential, we are going to be ranking this as a C tier Pokemon. So it's going to have some play, but you're not really going to see this in many decks. And the only deck it can really function in is Dipling, which is why we give it the C tier. If there are more Festival League Pokemon that are released in the future, which are going to be more meta-threatening, then this is potentially going to move up the ratings. But for now, I think C tier is fair. It's going to see some play. But yeah, let us know down in the comments if you agreed with that. Are there any other cards that synergise well here? Are there any other strategies that you can think of that can be used? It will help us, it will help other followers of the channel, and if this is the first video that you're watching in this series, go back and watch the rest. We're also working our way through the entire Twilight Masquerade set, so stay tuned for those. Follow the channel, it really helps us, and until next time, that's me shuffling out again.